Welcome back. In today's video, I'll be discussing how different soils can be utilised in different stages of growing your bonsai. Disclaimer: the views and opinions in this video are a mixture of my own experience, which is very limited, paired with research. As always, take everything with a pinch of salt and understand that what works for me may not work for everyone. The goal in bonsai is to have a well ramified healthy tree in a bonsai container. But how do we get there? There are some tips and tricks to save time and speed up the processes in the art form. There are overarching stages in bonsai terms: development and refinement. We will start with developmental. The development stage starts from seed and finishes the moment we put a tree into a bonsai pot or container, thus starting the control of growth. Soil goes hand in hand with this transition, as we have to drastically change soil composition once a tree is placed into a small pot. It's important to note that just because we place a tree into a bonsai pot does not mean it is ready for that pot. There's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to this, which can dramatically slow down growth, meaning if this part is completed too early, it could take you decades to reach the refinement stage. More on that later. Of course, the best way to grow a tree is to leave it in the ground. The natural earth around us will have the best nutrients and conditions for native trees. The issue with leaving a tree in the ground means it will never become a bonsai. The closest we can get to simulating the ground would be to plant a tree in the ground but dig it up every few years, or collect a tree, which is also known as yamadori, which translates to a collection from mountains, or in the UK, someone's back garden, yardadori. I personally have never collected a tree, so I'll not be going into yamadori and collected tree soils and care for now. Hopefully in the future. The next is organic soils in plant pots, the kind you find trees growing in garden centres. I personally do not grow from seed. The youngest tree I have bought was 3 years old from seed. This is partly because I have not looked into seeds, but also because if I can skip the first few years, then that means I'm reaching refinement earlier. Garden centre stock is usually planted in big, deep containers with fully organic material. This is great for vigour and growth. It also has its drawbacks. The growth can be uncontrollable, long internodes, etc. But the first part of the developmental stage should be nabari and trunk growth focused. It doesn't take long to grow branches and start the ramification process on most species. What takes time is a trunk size that matches the desired finished size of the tree, whether that be mame, shohin, chu, and so on. It is impossible to know the ratio between branch elongation and trunk thickness, but we do know the longer you let branches run, the quicker the trunk or base will thicken. After all, the branch length usually means more leaves, which in turn creates more energy due to photosynthesis, which then allows the trunk and roots to gain size. Where I am in the UK, fully organic soils can be an issue in the winter due to rainfall. The soil can stay far too wet for too long, so I personally opt for a 75 to 25% mix of organic potting mix and perlite. Perlite is an amorphous volcanic glass that has a relatively higher water content, typically formed by the hydration of obsidian, or so Google says. In my terms, it's a cheap alternative to pumice. It is also great to use for root over rock development, as roots will not penetrate perlite and rather grow through it, meaning quicker root growth and thicker root growth. Organic soils are mostly potting mixes which contain loam, peat, sand and pine bark. Cocoa coir is a good choice as it retains less moisture than compost or soil, but contains enough that you do not have to water every day depending on the mix. I like to use cocoa coir and perlite at a 75 to 25% mix for species that like a drier environment such as pines or junipers. The only exception to this for me is indoor or tropical trees. Due to where I live, these must come indoors over the winter but are still in development. I use cocoa coir and perlite but flip the ratio to 25% cocoa and 75% perlite. Still in development but moving on to a time when your trunk is the right size for the style you are aiming for, is branching as well as starting to control the roots. Until now, we have left our tree to grow wild, or we have structurally pruned and styled our tree, leaving a sacrificed branch or two. It's now time to start working on the branching / nabari. Now we could have struck gold and started with a nice nabari, meaning we now need to start creating a more dense root base, ready for the transition to its bonsai pot. It can be a good idea to transition slowly from organic to inorganic. This could either be leaving some organic soil in the root ball or using a mixture of organic and inorganic between repotting to ensure the tree transitions without ill health. Not every tree needs a nabari. There are a lot of high quality trees that have no nabari, but a nabari is always more favourable. In this stage, we wire the secondary, tertiary branches, we bend and cut, we heal those cuts, we also perform more in-depth root work and selection to ensure our nabari is coming along. This is usually the time when inorganic soils are introduced. It's important to note that you could grow your tree in fully inorganic soil this whole time, but research has shown that a tree grown in a fully inorganic mix compared to a fully organic mix in the same container size grows 5 times slower. Some practitioners do not mind the grow it slow approach, and there is just cause for growing this way. It means less cuts, shorter internodes, and the start of more controlled growth. That being said, if you want to add 2 inches to a trunk, it could take a decade or more. Inorganic soils. There are some mainstream soils and some experimental alternatives. Starting with the mainstream. Akadama. Akadama is a naturally occurring granular clay-like mineral. Akadama is mined from balls of volcanic clay in Japan. They are then dried or baked to a desired hardness. Akadama is one of the greatest substrates to use in bonsai due to the way it breaks down. It allows roots to enter your system as it breaks down, which in turn creates finer and finer roots, which is something you desire when your tree is in a 6-inch pot. Sounds perfect, right? Everything has its drawbacks. Akadama has different qualities. A poor quality akadama will break down too quickly and essentially turn into mud. It will need to be sifted as it's very dusty. Make sure you get a high quality grade. Pumice. Pumice is a soft volcanic rock. It is great at absorbing water and nutrients, which it will also give back to the roots. It is mainly used for drainage as well as ramification of roots. It doesn't perform like akadama, but is usually added to species that require a drier soil mix, such as pines and coniferous species. Lava rock. Lava rock is what it says it is. It too is good for drainage and water retention. It is porous and can help retain a good structure even when the akadama has broken down. Konuma. Konuma is acidic in nature, usually used for trees that like an acidic soil mix. Azaleas are a prime example. These are the most popular mixes. Depending on the species, you can use these 3 soils in different ratios and have a healthy bonsai. The drawback with popular, or for akadama being hard to get if you're not in Japan, where it is mined, is the price. These are also some of the most expensive substrates, which is a major reason why a lot of enthusiasts choose alternative options. So what are the alternative options? There's always more way than one to skin a cat. Here are some alternatives. Molar clay. Molar clay is a mixture of diatom shells and smestite clay. It is mined in Denmark and is used in many different ways. When bonsai enthusiasts mention cat litter, this is what they mean, although only specific companies produce cat litter that can be used in bonsai. Not every cat litter can be used. Perlite. As mentioned earlier, perlite is expanded volcanic glass. It is formed by heating to around 1000 C, at which point it pops and becomes many times its original size. It's incredibly lightweight, sterile, and never breaks down naturally. Its drawback is that roots will not enter the particle. Water doesn't penetrate it either, but does surround it. It also floats, which isn't a big issue, but it does move around in the pot. Leca. Leca is a clay hydrophonic, also known as expanded clay. It provides good aeration and can prevent soil-borne insect pests. It could be seen as a replacement for pumice as it contributes to the soil mix in the same way. Drainage, helps aeration, and can retain some nutrients. Kiryu. Kiryu is a hard porous grit, mainly for drainage and aeration. Kyodama. Kyodama is a solid granular soil that will never break down. Zeolite. Zeolite is a mineral aggregate made of metallic elements, very porous, and an interesting fact is that it is negatively charged. Most nutrients are positively charged. Zeolite acts as a colloid, which means it can store vast amounts of nutrients. It can balance the nutrients within the soil mix. The issue is with zeolite is that each particle must be full up with nutrients before it then lets the nutrients back to the roots. Gravel. Usually a quartz gravel. Again, this helps with drainage. And I'm sure there are many, many more. Please pop into the comments if there's any alternatives that you use that hasn't been mentioned. Refinement. In refinement, due to now being in a smaller container, meaning restricted root growth, we would use mostly all inorganic substrates. Some may still use fine pine bark or an organic medium that holds its form, but most mixes will be at least 90% inorganic. Now this video could go on for hours regarding pH levels and macronutrients, etc. Remembering this is a channel mostly for beginners and enthusiasts looking to start bonsai without breaking the bank. That being said, this channel is centered around bonsai on a budget, although the one place I try not to cut corners is soil, mainly because I know how much a good soil mix can aid and a bad soil mix can harm. This year I have spent just under £60 on akadama, pumice, lava rock and fine pine bark. For my collection mostly of mame and shohin trees, this still gave me enough substrate to repot 13 trees and counting, as well as cutting. Of course, the bigger the collection and the bigger the trees, the more this will cost. The reason akadama is a sole outlier is because of its ability to ramify a root system. Not only does this mean finer roots, but generally the upper growth will follow the root system. The finer the root growth, the finer the branch growth, the finer the twigging, which is what refinement is all about. I know a lot of people do not use akadama, but this alone is the reason of why it is far beyond any alternative for me. That being said, the alternatives will still enable a healthy tree, although it may be harder to refine. 99% of us won't be showcasing any trees at the next Cocoa Fruit 10. Some additives to mention that aren't part of the core soil mix but can promote health. Mycorrhiza, a fungi that helps with root growth. It breaks down nutrients in forms that the roots can then access. A very important part of pine's root system. Biochar, made from plant and animal biomass. It can neutralise acidity and store nutrients. It can also reduce the chance of powdery mildew. Fertilisers. Again, this is a subject for another video, but generally speaking, these can be organic or inorganic. Can be placed on the soil or mixed with the soil. I will make a fertiliser video soon. In refinement, we are maintaining the tree in its silhouette, managing growth and constantly ramifying or replacing branches if needed. This is where a bonsai will spend most of its life. In other words, this would be a completed tree. Although, with living art, there is no end, and the beautiful part of bonsai is that a tree is forever changing and maturing. I currently only have a few trees I would class as in this refinement stage. Not that they would win any prizes, but just that I have been able to create the trunk size and structural branching I desired and reduce the root ball to fit it into a bonsai container where it can grow happily. To conclude, the development stage is usually easy to maintain. The soil mixtures used mean trees will not need everyday care. If it rains for a week, you won't have to water them. They will grow fast and vigorous. For me, this is the fun stage of growing trees, and the part I enjoy the most thus far. It's where all the major decisions are made and the before and afters are more shocking. The refinement stage is a harder challenge for maintaining health. This is where soil mixes get infinitely more important. With inorganic soils and some species needing direct sunlight, you could easily be watering these trees 3 to 4 times a day in the summer. Repotting every 2 to 5 years depending on the species and vigour, but this is where the true image of a miniature tree is made. I'll be covering some of the information in this video in separate videos, so make sure to subscribe for future content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again soon.